Did it sound all right out there? It's really cool. It has so many different sounds. Anyway, that was fun. Well, it's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be here. I have enjoyed myself so much for the 3 days that I've been here. This is my last morning here, and it has been great. It's been great meeting a lot of you students and the teachers, and I think the university is fantastic. I'm going to share with you some principles out of my book. I told you about it. How many of you are here for the first time that weren't here on? Okay, well, quite a few of you actually. Okay, so some of you weren't here at all. So you're not going to be able to hear my whole entire story or testimony, so I won't be able to get into all of that. But I'm going to share with you a few principles from my book. I wrote a book called SOAR, S-O-A-R, and it's a book on how to live out God's dream for your life. God has given all of us dreams, but there is a process in how you develop a dream. And there is a big difference between a dream and a delusion. Any dream from God always has structure, always has substance to it. There are steps, there are plans, there are strategic things that it takes to fulfill that dream. A delusion is just wishful, fanciful thinking, people that want to do something that they have no talent or gift for, and they just daydream about it. But real dreams from God take time. They have blueprints, and they have structure to them. But to me, there's no way to really fulfill the will of God in your life without the first thing. You actually have to know him. So the first principle in my book is called surrender. Because God made every single one of us a free-willed being. He didn't make any robots. He made everybody with a will and a spirit to make a choice. So if you want to follow God, it's because you chose to follow him. There are many people in here, it's a Christian university, but I don't assume for 1 second that everyone is following Christ. Because I've spoken at lots of Christian universities. I've known theologians who have never accepted Christ. They know everything about him. God is not interested in you knowing everything about him. He's interested in you actually knowing him. And there's a huge difference between knowing about somebody and knowing them. I've hung with many famous celebrities and movie stars and different people that I thought I knew before I met them. And then when I met them, I'm like, well, they're nothing like I thought they would be. And there were drummers that were idols of mine, and I read everything about them and read every book and magazine article. And then when I'd meet them, I'd be, wow, gosh, they're not like I thought they'd be. God's not interested in you knowing the Bible forward and backward without actually knowing him. You just know about his book. To know him requires one thing, and one thing first: your own desire. A lot of people think that human beings are thinking beings. We're thinking beings. But the truth is, that's secondary. We are first desiring beings. We desire things. We go after things we desire. A lot of times we think about it later, and we pay the consequences. We are desiring beings. We desire things. And what we desire, we go after. We are born worshipers, all of us. It's just a question of what's going to get our worship. If you don't think we're all worshipers, go to a football game. Go to a basketball game. Go to a concert. Go anywhere where people are being idolized. We are worshipers. The question is, what are we going to worship? Because we're going to worship something. We're created to do it. It's in our DNA. And we desire things. So if you want to really fulfill the purposes of God for your life and do what you were put on this planet to do, you cannot do it apart from him. Because Jesus says, apart from me, you can do nothing. We can't, it's like a branch cannot exist on its own without being grafted into a tree. So we can't really fulfill the will of God without actually knowing God, and we can't actually know God unless we want to know him. And God put this principle in the earth, this principle of love. Some of you in here are married or have been married, and some of you love people. Hopefully all of you love somebody. But how many know that you don't want to force somebody to love you? I hope when you go to the altar and get married to your loved one that you want to marry you, I hope you're not forcing them by gunpoint and putting a gun at their head. Love me, marry me, right? You'll never enjoy the feeling of it. Did you ever see the movie Bruce Almighty? Anybody ever see that movie? There's some great principles. There's actually a Christian director who did that. There's some great principles he puts in there. Because Jim Carrey wants Jennifer Aniston to come back to him, and he wants her to love him. But he realizes, God says, okay, you could be God, but you can't mess with free will. And so it was a really powerful statement. So he could do everything, but you can't go against somebody's will. And then I remember him getting so frustrated in the movie. He goes, love me. because he wanted to make that happen. But God does not force anybody to love him. He merely reveals himself. He reveals his love to the world, but he wants you to choose to love him. Just like the person you want to marry or be in love with, you want them to choose to love you. You don't want to have to force them or manipulate them or coercion. So with God, it's the same way. Many of the principles of God are very simple to understand because we understand them on a basic human level. We want to be loved. God wants to be loved. But he's only going to be loved if you choose and desire to want to know him. But I can tell you, I've walked with this God for a long time. I've walked with this Jesus. I consider myself a Christ follower. It's a lot different than being knowledgeable about Christ. What if you're stuck in some desert island somewhere and you don't have your Bible? You still have to know the one. You still have to know God. And you have to be able to talk with him and communicate. He speaks to us all the time. Sometimes it's in our own voice. He's not coming out audibly, but he's speaking to us through people, through circumstances, through situations. He's always trying to get your attention. He's trying to bring you to him. But you still have to pull the trigger. You still have to go, I want the Lord. So many of you in here, you maybe grew up in church, you know a lot of churchy things, but you've got to make your faith your own. You've got to own it. At some point, you can't get into heaven based on somebody else's backstage pass. It's got to be you and your relationship with the Lord. And all I know is I've met all kinds of celebrities in the world. I've met all kinds of people. And the people who do not have Christ are empty people. Because all they have are the things of the world, but they don't have the depth, the meaning, the substance, the purpose. They don't have that relationship because God created an empty place inside the soul of each human being that he reserved for himself alone, that nothing in this world could fill it. No amount of sex, drugs, rock and roll is going to fill that void and make you feel fulfilled. So stop chasing after those things and pursue him. And then when you pursue him, he'll begin to show you what your gifts are, what your talents are. And there's a process of all this, and that's what my book is all about. It's about the process of discovering your gift. So once you surrender, some of you know what you want to do. Some of you are tentative about what you want to do because you kind of know it, but you need somebody else to tell you it's okay to do it. But you don't have to wait for somebody else. You don't ever have to apologize for being who you are. You have to own who you are and say, this is who God made me, and this is how he made me, and I'm going to be that. But you have to discover what he has for you. And like I said, some of you will know it right away, and some of you don't know. And for those that don't know, it's very simple. You have to dig, you have to uncover, and you have to pray and say, God, I don't know what you've called me to do, but you do. You know why you put me here, so show me. And I'll be available, and I'll be open, and I'll be malleable and pliable, so show me so I can do what I'm here to do. And once you discover that thing, then you can begin to dream about it. Once I discovered drumming, it came by me in waves. It wasn't just an automatic thing. It kind of would just hover, and all of a sudden and sometimes God's putting you right by the thing that you're going to be connected to later, and you have no idea that that's going to happen. I'm going to play you a little footage, but before I play it, I'm going to tell you a story. I grew up fatherless, most of you that were here, you heard the story. I grew up fatherless, 7 brothers and sisters with a single immigrant mother, so we were dirt poor. When I was about 10 years old, my mother signed me up for the Big Brother, Big Sister program. It still is in existence. It's a great mentoring program. Well, I had a big brother in the program, and he kind of mentored me, him and his wife, for like 4 years. And one day, I was in their living room, and they had a son who was a drummer. Now, I was 12 years old. I was not a drummer then. I had no idea that I would be a drummer, but I had a rare opportunity to sit on their son's drum set, and I was friends with these people until they recently died, so I remained friends with them for like 40 years. And it was amazing, and they said, we found some Super 8 footage of you that we'd like to give to you. I'm like, really, what is it? He said, it's you on the drums. I'm like, what? Me on the drums? Like, from what? You played in our living room one day. So I was like, man, I'd love to see that footage. So I'm going to play that for you right now if they pop it up there. It's silent, but it's me on the drums. Now, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never played the drums. I have no idea that I'm going to be a drummer at that time. But God has his fingerprints on my life early on. And he's got his fingerprints on your life. I call those things the fingerprints of God. Last night I was speaking to a few of us here, and I told a story about Colonel Sanders. But I had no idea that in the room was the Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket. You know what I mean? And I was telling a story about how he didn't get to do what he did until he was in his 60s. I call those things the fingerprints of God. Some people would call them a coincidence, but they're not. They're God just saying, I was here, I was there, I'm always here, I'm always there, I'm in it, I'm in every moment. So I would have no idea then that later on I would become a drummer and go around the world and playing with some of the most famous people in the world. But the footage is like proof that he was there. So sometimes this has happened to you. You've already been connected to the thing you're supposed to do. You just didn't know, or nobody filmed it, or you don't remember, but you had a certain flutter in your heart. You had a certain feeling that made you feel good. That, oh, I was around that. I kind of like that. But for some reason, maybe somebody squashed that idea or squashed that dream. Or you listened to somebody, maybe you were trying to be a comedian, you were trying to be funny, and people made fun of you, and they said, oh, that's stupid. And then you go, oh, yeah, I guess that's stupid. And then you believe them. Remember, words are the most powerful thing we carry. Words are like secret weapons. And there's a lot of words in my book and a lot of quotes in my book because I've always loved the power of words because I didn't have that many people speaking powerful words to me. So since I didn't have that, I was going to speak them to myself. I memorized great scriptures and I memorized incredibly inspiring motivational quotes, and I spoke the words to myself because the Bible says David encouraged himself in the Lord. When he was down and out and couldn't get arrested or was looking to get arrested, people were shunning him, he encouraged himself. When you're down in the trenches, you got to learn to encourage yourself. You got to be your own number one cheerleader until other people begin to cheer. And that's all of us, because a lot of times we feel alone. Okay, so once you discover that thing that you're interested in, then you can begin to dream about it. But you can't dream alone. Dreams, again, has to be followed by the pursuit of something. So after you dream of something, you have to strategize. You have to, once I began dreaming about becoming a drummer, I began to strategize. Well, what would that take to do? Well, first thing I would do is take lessons from the best people I could study with. People that are, and this is what you have to do. Whatever your gifting is, you have to educate yourself in that gifting. Whether it's through schooling, whether it's through private lessons, whether it's through online, whether it's through books, attending conferences, workshops, you have to take that diamond's worth of potential and mine it out. Because I look at potential like a diamond, really. Like, what is a diamond before it's a diamond? It's a piece of iron ore in the ground. It's a dirty rock that has to be dug out, and you've got to excavate like 2 tons of rock to get the diamond. So you've got to go through all this stuff. Then it's got to go through all these processes. It's got to be cut and scraped and cleaned. It's got to be until eventually it ends up at a jewelry store behind a piece of black velvet and really looks beautiful, and it becomes this coveted thing that everybody wants to buy. But I ask you this, was it not always a diamond the entire time? It was never not a diamond. It was always a diamond, but it just wasn't obvious to everybody else until it goes through the process. See, you have a diamond's worth of potential inside of you, but it has to go through the process, and the process is difficult. There's cutting and there's scraping and there's cleaning and it's uncomfortable. But that is what is inside of you. And once you develop that, then it begins to shine for the whole world to see. And then people go, wow, look at her go, or look at him go at what he does. You know what I mean? But it's always been in there. But there's a process. There has to be a strategy in place to develop these things. And then there's the pursuit of it. To only dream of it, to only strategize it is not enough. You have to begin to actually pursue it. And another word for pursuit is just hard work. And there is nothing that you're going to accomplish in this life that's going to feel worthwhile without hard work. Thomas Edison said, if we all did what we were capable of, we would literally astound ourselves. If we all did what we were capable of. I mean, how many people are let's say you got 100% capability of something. Most of us are operating so low it's a shame. It's embarrassing. In other words, we're not using any of the... Have you done your best work at everything you do at all times? Are you giving your absolute best to every class, to every assignment, to every person, to your family, to your job? Most people are operating subpar. We're capable of so much more, but we just don't want to give it out. You got to realize this life is short. Very, very, very short. It goes by in an instant. I want to spend the rest of my life giving all that I have at all times. I want to be exhausted. I am exhausted every night. Ask Ryan. I've been here for 3 days, and every night I've been exhausted because I am pouring out myself, whether it's musically, physically, spiritually, relationally, verbally, whatever. I'm giving myself out. I want to die exhausted. because I want to know that I have given everything that I have to give in this life. I don't want to leave. I always tell my kids, do your best. Don't leave anything on the table. Don't leave anything on the table. You can feel good about it if you know, hey, I didn't get the job, but I did my absolute best. I did my absolute best, right? Because how can you feel good when you know you had 70% more you could have given to something? The reason you're doing it is for God, because the Bible says to do all things for the glory of God. I was a janitor at my own high school. I told that story the other day. I was a janitor at my high school. But when I did that job, I was doing it for God. I was going to do the best work I possibly could. I would have no idea that God would use that janitor position as my gateway into the music industry, because my band director discovered me cleaning in the band room. So you just never know. Just take every single assignment you have, every job you have, every opportunity you have, and do your best work. Don't do it for the people that might not appreciate you, because that won't be the motivation you need. Do it for God, knowing that He sees all things, and He'll reward you for the work that you do. The other thing, there's so many principles in my book, and I will not be able to share them all. But I want to share one. It's principle number 7. It's called BEND, B-E-N-D, where a lot of people never fulfill their dream is because it's met with opposition. They get discouraged, and then they quit. And they haven't learned that life is about bending. God gives you a vision for somewhere that you're going to go, but He doesn't tell you how you're going to get there. And it's always going to require faith. It's always going to require faith and belief. And you have to believe, and you have to be willing to bend. When I was 18 and I graduated from high school, I joined a local band, and they were the most professional band in the town I was living in, which was called Eugene, Oregon. They were professional. They had played down at Disneyland. They had working gigs everywhere, and I was a young 17-year-old kid. So I auditioned, joined the band, and their goal was to go back to Disneyland in Anaheim and score the house band at Disneyland again, because they had the house gig for a couple of years. So I was super pumped and excited. 17, my career is going to start. I'm going to be down at Disneyland playing at the Magic Kingdom. My first drum set was a Mickey Mouse drum set made of paper heads. Now I'm going to be at the actual Magic Kingdom. It couldn't be a better storybook ending. Except when we got down to Disneyland and auditioned, they weren't asked back. They didn't get the job. And so now I'm, 17, unemployed in Los Angeles, and my dream is evaporating of wanting to make it in music. And so I didn't know what to do. And my mother gave me some good words of advice. She said, "Don't come back, son." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Don't come back. Don't come back to Eugene. If you come back, you'll never leave. You'll never fulfill your dream. Stick it out. Find a way to stay. Find a way to make it." Because, when you have discouragement, you're tempted to put your tail between your legs and crawl back home. And I was like, okay. So I didn't know what to do, 17 years old. So I, by faith and by belief, because I believed in this dream God gave me, I wound up at Beverly Hills High School in Beverly Hills, California. I didn't know what to do to meet people. So I had this crazy idea. I said, you know what? I'm going to sit on the lawn at Beverly Hills High School at lunchtime. I'm going to bring my boom box, my ghetto blaster, a practice pad and some sticks, and I'm just going to jam out to some Earth, Wind, and Fire. Right on the lawn, in the middle of everywhere. And I know that if there's some other musicians here, they'll probably go, well, who's this new guy? And come up and talk to me. So that's exactly what happened. 5 minutes later, this little kid came up to me and started talking to me and said, "Oh, are you new here?" I'm like, "Yeah." I pretended to be a student there for a whole year. I just kept going every day. And nobody ever thought that I didn't go to school there. And so I kept showing up. But I met this kid named Lenny. And then about 10 minutes later, another kid comes up to me. He plays the bass. His name's Kenny. So Kenny starts driving me around Westwood. We start hanging out. We become buddies for the next month or so. And then eventually he takes me up to his house. And I was like, wow, whatever these people do, they're crazy rich. Because they lived in Bel Air at the top of the mountain in Bel Air, and they had like 5 acres. 5 acres in Bel Air is the most prime real estate in the world. And I was like, I go up the driveway, and there's pet llamas. I'm like, well, who has pet llamas? Dr. Doolittle, maybe. But anyway, and then when I got to the house, he introduced me to his father, because he never told me who his father was. He introduced me to his father, and I couldn't believe it. His father was one of my idols of all time. His father's name was Berry Gordy, and Berry Gordy is the founder of Motown Records. Motown Records is the record label that signed the Jackson 5, Diana Ross and the Supremes, the Temptations, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, the Four Tops, Lionel Richie, the Commodores. I mean, all the great R&B and soul pop groups of the 60s and 70s were Motown artists, and he was the founder. And they didn't know that Motown was my favorite label. I used to buy all the 45s, the records, when I was a kid. So all of a sudden, from the thing that imploded, which was my dream falling apart down in Anaheim, the Disneyland thing didn't happen, God opened another way. But I had to have faith. I had to believe. And sometimes you have to take risks and you have to have courage. And so I sat on that lawn not knowing what else to do. And then the other kid that I met on the lawn that day was a kid named Lenny, who became Lenny Kravitz, who became a huge rock star. And then I ended up becoming his drummer, and he became an actor. And but they were just young kids like me. But it wouldn't have happened if I quit, if I went up. So I had to learn to bend. I had to learn. And so about a month later, I'm up at Barry Gordy's house, because I'm up there all the time now. And Kenny is the only kid I knew who had pinball machines in his living room like you would at an arcade. He had all these pinball machines. I was like, wow, I don't even have to put a quarter in it? He goes, no, man, they're mine. I was like, oh, that's cool. So I started playing pinballs, and I noticed 2 Rolls Royces pulling up through the driveway, and nobody was in the front room but me. And so I heard the doorbell ring, and nobody answered it. So I said, oh, I guess I'll answer the door. Nobody's here. So I opened the door, and lo and behold, it's Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. And I'm like, how did I get here? I once was starving. I used to get my clothes out of a Goodwill drop-off box. My brothers and sisters would hoist me in, and I would hand them clothes because we were poor and we had nothing. And now I'm entertaining the Jackson 5, and I'm talking with them, and I'm trying to get them to jam with me. I'm like, come on, Michael, I know all your songs, man. I know every tune. Come on, there's drums in the jam room, and Jermaine, there's a bass over there. Let's play. And Michael was all like, oh, kid, you got a lot of heart. I like you. You got a lot of spunk. I'm like, well, man, I know all your records, man. I used to belong to the fan club. I love you guys, man. Come on, jam with me. And he was like, oh, we're here for a meeting with Barry, but maybe next time, man, but you're going to go places, And so anyway, so that was my encounter. Well, 3 years later, I ended up recording with Michael. I recorded on a song, and he remembered me as that kid, and it was a very cool thing, because all of a sudden it was like, yeah, God made that happen. But I used to write in my diary. And I used to write, I guess, decrees and visions and dreams. I would write, one day I'm going to meet Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. One day I'm going to meet Earth, Wind, and Fire and play with them. One day I'm going to meet Buddy Rich, the world's greatest drummer. And all these things came to pass. But it required a flexibility, and I had to be malleable, because when discouragement comes and disappointment comes, most of us break like an oak tree, because we're very stiff. And then a storm comes, and an oak tree is a stiff, dense wood, and it doesn't know how to bend, so it just cracks and gives up. But we got to learn to be like a palm tree. If you notice in a hurricane, the palm trees are always just kind of swaying, right? Because in the pursuit of your dream will come many, many disappointments. Every single thing in my life, the dream of being a drummer, the dream of being a writer, the dream of being a speaker and a teacher, were all met with extreme opposition and disappointments, and nobody wanted to let me in to do it. And so I had to learn to move past that, and I had to learn not to get mad at God for something that God wasn't doing. God was not the one, sometimes adversity is where we grow. It's when I was turned down and rejected at different auditions that I would have to go back and rebuild my drumming and realize what I was lacking. All those things were meant to build me, not destroy me. And, we all like times of peace and prosperity, but the truth is we only grow in times of adversity. And it's just like working out. You don't get muscles at the gym by laying around on the couch eating ice cream. You only get it when you're busting your muscles and they're hurt and they're in pain and they're torn down, they're broken, and then you build. And it's just the way God designed life. Everything has to be broken down in order to be built up. So when discouragement comes your way, failure is only temporary. What makes it permanent is quitting. Just don't quit. And I always used to write in my old books, I had 3 words, never give up. I mean, just don't give up. Whatever that thing is, don't give up. Just keep working on it. You got to be humble so you can receive the correction and the criticism. And if you're not humble, you'll never grow. You'll never reach your potential ever. And you're living in a generation that is not as humble as it used to be. So don't be part of that. Be humble and be able to receive correction and criticism, because that's how you're going to turn that rock into a diamond, because it's there and other people can see what you lack. You just might not be able to see it. So every time I've done anything, I've always asked people to critique my book, critique my speaking, critique my writing, critique my drumming, because from all those different sources, I could take a nugget from each of them and improve. And the last thing I'm going to end with is this. You can only make it to the top of the world by being the person you're supposed to be. Be who God made you to be. Don't be somebody else. Don't copy somebody else. Don't clone somebody else. We learn from everybody, but eventually you got to embrace who it is that God made you. And you got to make your identity and your confidence that you're a son or daughter of the living God, not in what you do and all that. Embrace who you are and the individuality of who you are, because God put you on this earth to express something that no one else is going to express quite the same way that you do. And once I learned to be myself and realize, okay, well, I have a different background than my other favorite drummers, and I got a different mother, and I got a different set of circumstances, and I got a serious side, I got a zany, goofy side, I've got a studious side. I just got to, this is who I am. And then I don't try to speak like other people. I don't try to play drums like other people or write like other people. I'm going to be me. I'm going to learn from everything and everybody, but I'm just going to be me. And you guys will really soar when you embrace who you are and just be that unique individual, And it's already there, but you just have to embrace it. And the last thing is, be kind to all the people that are around you. They're all fighting a great battle. We have no idea. A person could be one sentence away from suicide or one sentence away from their life being changed forever for the good. All around us, we never really, if we could see inside of people's hearts, if we literally could see heart to heart and see the baggage and the damage people are carrying, we would just go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. If we would do that to everybody, because if we saw the great battles that people are fighting inside, we would have so much mercy and compassion. We don't, and 90% of the time we don't share it with people. But inside of you is a great struggle going on. So use your goodness and use your kindness. Words are life. They change life. Speak words of life to everybody around you. You could be changing somebody's life, and someone might change yours at the same time. Well, I wish I had more time to share with you. My heart is filled with things that I would love to impart. But it's been an honor and a privilege. I want to thank Ryan Haynes for inviting me, and the other Ryan who told him about me. And I hope you got something out of this morning and maybe the previous chapel. No matter what I give, I always feel like it was nothing, because there's a reservoir of water inside of me, and I feel like I just gave you a trickle, but that's all I can do in the time we have. But I love pouring my life out to people, and I love trying to make a difference, and I expect to see you guys somewhere in the world making a difference, because that's what we're here for. Thank you very much. Take care, and God bless.